which is called the Loan Participation Program. Today, we're coming together to launch a new program. The second program in our series here is called the Growth Loan Fund. And so the purpose of this conversation is to tell you about the Growth Loan Fund, get into some of the details, and make sure that every entrepreneur in the state who could take advantage of these funds is aware of this opportunity, because it's a really big one. I just want to speak a moment to why we're focused on Minnesota's startup landscape. We in our state are blessed with an extraordinary market of entrepreneurs. This is a state that has really seen an energizing push over the last decade, really, and even in the last 3 or 4 years, of people starting high-tech, high-growth startups. The kind of startups that you pull venture capital money into, right? The kind of things you read about in Silicon Valley, they are happening here in Minnesota. And in many ways, they're happening in more unique and more powerful ways. Entrepreneurs that are based here are working very closely with the surrounding corporate community. They're building startups they really care about. They've got some of the best business survivability numbers in the country. And Minnesota was recently named by Startup Genome as the 4th top emerging startup market in the world. So of all the markets in the world, of startup markets that are growing and emerging and growing fast at this exact moment, Minnesota's 4th. That's a tremendous nod to the fact that startups and entrepreneurs here are really moving quickly. And I think when you look at the ecosystem here, that proximity to the Fortune 500 market, that access of talent that we've invested in as a state makes this an extraordinary place to start a company. However, we know that starting a business is really hard, and you heard that from some of our guests today. Getting going is tough, and getting the capital to get moving can be really challenging. So as we talk to startup leaders across the state, as we asked, where should government be playing a role here? We knew that on top of Launch Minnesota, the program that gives these early innovation grants that we have, on top of the angel tax credit, which is a critical lever for getting dollars into the hands of startups, a growth loan fund with a very low interest rate can be extremely valuable to startups at the beginning of their journey. So we're going to talk about that today, talk about some of the details, give you a sense of what this is like from some of our top startup leaders in the state, and make sure everyone is aware of it. One of the things that we wanted to say here at the top that is just a real priority of the Wallace Flanagan administration and of our work here at DEED is focusing on getting these dollars to those who might not otherwise be able to access the money. And one of the key structures around this program nationally is that we have metrics and targets for getting dollars to people of color, women, veterans, and those that live in rural environments. Sometimes those are individuals in our state that, let's face it, get overlooked when it comes to getting investments from venture capitalists, from banks, and what have you. So the national standard there is for us to reach 25% of the money in these funds towards entrepreneurs that fit those categories. We are going to do better. We have set a goal to reach 50% in Minnesota in terms of the amount of dollars that go to entrepreneurs who might otherwise face some challenges in the market. Because if Minnesota is going to build a stronger economy, we have got to have new entrepreneurs, new wealth coming into this game to help grow the jobs of the future. That's what's going to really change our economic outlook in Minnesota. So this program is a big part of it. Small businesses affect every single person in our state. 3 out of 4 Minnesotans work in a small business. So all of this work coming together, we think is going to be one of the major components of job growth in the coming years, and especially at a time when it's an intensely competitive market and talent can live anywhere, businesses can grow anywhere. We as Minnesota have to be in an assertive stance to help build the kind of economy that we know will lead to long-term prosperity. Startups are the central component of that journey as it begins, and we want more of those startups to start and grow in Minnesota. So without further ado, we're going to get into some of the details of this particular launch. I'll turn it over to my colleague, Kevin McKinnon, who will walk through what the Growth Loan Fund is and how it works. And then we're going to hear from Neela Mulgard. She runs our Launch Minnesota network in the state. This is a flagship program for startups in Minnesota. And then what I'm looking most forward to is we're going to hear from some of our startup leaders in the state. Dr. Paul Campbell, who leads the Brown Venture Group. He's a venture capitalist. And then Ping Ye, an entrepreneur who's doing extraordinary things in the biotech space, who can talk to the importance of government playing a more forward-leaning role here. So with that said, Kevin, I'm going to turn over to you, and we'll hear more about the Growth Loan Fund in particular.
Thanks, Commissioner. Kevin McKinnon. I'm Deputy Commissioner of Economic Development for DEED. The Growth Loan Fund provides venture debt or loans directly from DEED to innovative seed and early stage technology businesses. The program will support Minnesota-based businesses that have raised less than $250,000 or slightly later stage businesses that are not yet ready for a Series A round. The Growth Loan Fund that we're announcing today totals $12.5 million of the $97 million that we are receiving from the U.S. Department of Treasury. Of the initial $29 million disbursement from Treasury, roughly $4 million will be available for this program in this initial round. As mentioned, borrowers will apply directly with deed, and the applicants must be one of certified for the Angel Tax Credit Program, raising capital from a venture or angel fund, or raising capital from an accredited investor. Applicants must be seeking equity investments in a funding round that includes at least one venture capital fund or accredited investor, including a minimum of a $500,000 investment from private investors. The Growth Loan Fund will provide loans that range from $100,000 to $400,000 based on 20% of the total investment in the defined funding round within 12 months of the loan approval. The businesses must complete at least 70% of the proposed equity raise to remain eligible for the loan and for loan disbursement. To qualify for the funding, the primary business activity must include one or more of the following: using proprietary technology to add value to a product, process, or service in a qualified high technology field, researching or developing a proprietary product, process, or service in a qualified high technology field, researching, developing, or producing a new proprietary technology for use in the fields of agriculture, tourism, forestry, mining, manufacturing, or transportation, or researching or developing a proprietary product, process, or service in the fields of agriculture, tourism, forestry, mining, manufacturing, or transportation. We look forward to receiving applications from businesses. Our details are at joinusmn.com/smallbusiness. We're really excited to launch the Growth Loan Fund. And now I'll turn it over to our director of the Launch Minnesota program, Neela Mulgard.
Thank you, Kevin. Really excited to be here today and have this opportunity to share how we are expanding the opportunity and increasing access to capital for Minnesota's innovators and startups. Through Launch Minnesota, other programs throughout DEED, and our numerous partners across the state, we strive to help our businesses successfully start and scale. We believe this funding will help us accelerate the creation and growth of new technology that is really solving real-world problems. To date, we have the innovation grants, we have the Angel Tax Credit Program that the Commissioner mentioned, and we have several loan programs. But what we really do is we leverage dollars to help increase that private investment. So to date, our innovation grants, we've been able to award over $6 million, and that was matched over 1-to-1 by private investors. Our Angel Tax Credit, just over the last 6 years, we've invested $35 million, but that infused $140 million back into Minnesota businesses. And now through SSBCI, we will even be able to better serve that full continuum of funding that our businesses demand. So happy to join you today, and I look forward to seeing the continued growth with our entrepreneurs and startups across Minnesota.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Neela. Well said. I mean, the point here around government funding, leveraging private funding is exactly why we're doing this. This isn't government creating a startup ecosystem. This is us playing a role to help accelerate it. That's our job in government. And that's why programs like Launch Minnesota exist, and why this Growth Loan Fund is just a great addition to our portfolio of ways we're helping startups get going. We are thrilled, though, to turn to some of the leaders who are making that a reality every day in our ecosystem. And I'm thrilled to first introduce Ping Ye from Stemonics. Ping was a past recipient of an angel loan fund about 8 or 9 years ago, I believe. He's going to tell us about that and give us a sense for, why this kind of funding from government is important, not only for Stemonics, but for our ecosystem more broadly. So Ping, thanks for joining us, and over to you.
Thank you, Commissioner Grove. Hello, everybody. My name is Ping, and about 8-9 years ago, as Commissioner Grove mentioned, in my basement in Eden Prairie, Minnesota, and after surviving cancer, I decided to use my 15 years of engineering background to start a company called Stemonics, and we were making an interesting product, if you will. We actually made human brains from skin, and this was one of the ideas after surviving cancer, because I wanted to find safer and more effective medicines. And one way to do that was to make human brains from skin to test new potential medicines for people. And the early days of a startup, it's very difficult. And when you have an idea like this that's a little bit out there, and most startup ideas are, you need that initial kind of perturbation or initial funding to prove out what is potentially possible and to validate that for the early stage angel investors, for example. And so that perturbation, in our case, as Demonics, in the early days and months of the idea, was to work with Deed and to get an angel loan fund back in the day. And to now, I'm excited to hear that there's this new growth loan fund as well, which could play a similar role for the dozens, hundreds of startups that can come from our Minnesota ecosystem. And I just want to highlight that one of the reasons why the initial funding, like a loan, is so important is because you have to, as a startup, prove to investors that this idea can hold water, to prove and validate that there's something there. And yes, you have the passion of an inventor or an entrepreneur with an idea, but more often than not, resources, funding are needed to take the next step, to prove that one thing. And then that one thing leads to another in terms of showing that you can de-risk the idea, and that produces kind of a resonance between what can be done and what investors will fund. And so that initial perturbation for us was the angel loan program. And just to highlight what happened, we raised another 30 plus million as a private company and another 34 million as we acquired a company on the NASDAQ. So in 7.5 years, it went from an idea in my basement to make some human brains from skin to a company that's now on the NASDAQ.
Well, thank you, Ping. It's just such an inspiring story, frankly, both your personal journey, but also the company that you've built. And it's, I think, a good example of any of the kind of startups that get built in Minnesota. This is a state where startup founders tackle challenges they deeply care about, and they find a way. So it's just an example, I think, of the state wanting to play a small part in all of that. And we're grateful for what you've done, and frankly, just kind of in awe of it all, quite frankly. Creating human brains from skin is not something that I wake up in the morning thinking I have to do. So I have to say I'm just kind of amazed. And thank you for joining us. I want to turn next to Paul Campbell. So Paul is a true disruptor. Paul and his partner Chris Brooks have built a fund called the Brown Venture Group. It is investing in startups particularly founded by Black founders and founders of color and indigenous founders as well. Paul has a unique view into our market, a view of what our market needs. He understands why startups do what they do and the role the state should play. And so, Paul, I'd just love to hear your perspective on Minnesota's startup ecosystem and why and how you'd like to see government play the right kind of role here in accelerating it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner Grove. And I'm really excited to say that we have a lot of traction at Brown Venture Group because of everybody that's on this call here and others in the private and public sector that are looking to make sure that we remove barriers to economic contribution for innovators who lack access to capital. And to me, this program is another one of the ways that we can help preserve after someone gets equity financing to go into some of the debt options without having to give up too much of their equity as they're growing to that next phase. Because as you're going through the cycles in venture, you have to preserve some of that as you consider your exit strategy. And this is another one of those things that helps remove those barriers. Oftentimes, it's not the idea or the capacity of entrepreneurs that we're finding for communities of color, contributors of color. It's simply lack of access to capital. So this is a really, really fantastic opportunity for us as a state to be more intentional, to figure out what we can, how we can win together in this area, how we can attract some federal opportunities as well, in addition to this SSBCI program. And I'm really excited about that work. I can tell you some of our entrepreneurs have benefited from the tax credit, and it's been beneficial for them to kind of keep going without having to keep on going back for other additional raises and things of that nature. So I'm excited about this program, and I just want to encourage everybody that this is all about a with strategy, working with the government and not for, in terms of like having this relationship back and forth between entrepreneurs, the ecosystem. And so I'm really excited about this opportunity and support it. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Paul, and thank you, Ping, for your leadership and for joining us today. I'll just say that in disruptive times, as Ping and Paul will tell you, people start stuff. It's just the nature of how economies work. And we've seen that throughout COVID, the last few years in Minnesota, small business starts have been way up. And with, an economic outlook that has some uncertainty to it right now, I think more people are going to be looking to start new things and take advantage of gaps in the market and build new companies. We want them to do it here. We want Minnesota to be the place where startups grow and can thrive and have the resources to do it. And this growth loan fund is a part of this broader $97 million is our state government's way of putting a flag out and saying, build your company here, build what matters in Minnesota. We have the kind of ecosystem that can help you thrive, and your government is going to be a partner in all that. I'll just add one last point here, maybe before pausing for questions we might have from our friends in the media. One other program that we've mentioned a couple times in this conversation, but is actually not active right now, is the Angel Tax Credit. This is a program that Minnesota, I think, practically invented 10 or 12 years ago, far before my time at Deed, that came out of a college thesis of a leader named Frank Jaskolke, who ended up going on to lead Medical Alley, to give a tax credit to venture capitalists who invested the angel round in businesses in Minnesota. It's an extraordinary idea. Dozens of states have copied us since then. And when this program is up and running, it brings nearly half of the funds that take advantage of this tax credit from outside of Minnesota. So it's a great way to get venture capitalists on the coast to be looking here. And right now, there's exactly $0 in that tax credit. We fought hard at the last legislative session to replenish that tax credit. It is not part of Minnesota's base budget, so you have to go back and fight for it every year. So this extraordinary tool that we use to put Minnesota's ecosystem on the map, it actually has no money in it right now. And I think as we look ahead to the future, the kinds of toolkit that you want to have in government to help venture capitalists and startups build these companies to really put Minnesota on a map when entrepreneurs can choose any ecosystem they want in today's job market. You've got to have tools like this, the Angel Tax Credit, Launch Minnesota, and today this Growth Loan Fund. So we are excited about that. We're excited to be here today. Bottom line is Minnesota is a great market for startups. And in government, we don't take any of that for granted. We want to play a more active and proactive role in all of it. So I think, unless I've missed anything, Kevin or Neela, maybe we'll pause and see if there's questions from our friends who've joined us from the media. Vita, over to you.
Yeah, hi everyone. I have a question about, these are, you're using the term loans, so I guess they're not grants. So does that mean these companies are expected to pay them back, or are they forgivable loans? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I sure can. These are definitely loans, and yes, there is a 7-year term on these loans, so we are expecting repayment. There is a 1% interest charge on these loans, and that will be in the first 4 years of the loan. And principal repayment starts after year 4. And the remainder of the loan will be due in a balloon payment in 7 years.
Why did you decide to do it as loans instead of as grants, right? Because are you planning to use this money for future grants then, or are you future loans?
Yeah, that's a good question, and this is part of our capital stack that we are bringing into the market. You'll hear shortly, hopefully later this month, about another program that we'll be launching, the venture capital program in part with this. These funds that we received from the U.S. Department of Treasury are meant to provide that capital access, and ultimately you want those funds back. Our long-term goal is to continue to create pots of money that we can continue to build on in the future and fund more companies when we get these funds back.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, Kevin. It's like different tools for different scenarios. And one of the benefits of a loan is we're not taking a stake in your company. It is your company. We are just helping you get started. You pay that back and you're done with us and you move on. So that is a great tool to have amongst many others in your toolkit. Other questions or comments?
Commissioner Grove, may I mention about the Angel Tax credit program? Yeah, we were a participant in that as well. And just to share the insights for everyone online, why it's so important. Investors have a lot of choices to invest across the country and around the world, and they're looking for the best opportunities, and deal terms are one of them. And so, if the credit is part of the deal terms for early startups, it can sway them towards investing to us. And it's one of the reasons that we were able to raise over 30 million, because it kicked us off in the early days for investors to see us as a better opportunity in Minnesota than in other parts of the country or around the world. And that makes a really big difference, because in the early days, startups can look very similar. And these differences in deal terms can make a big difference in where dollars are invested by individuals.
Since you got the loan fund and the tax credit, I mean, to Kavita's earlier question, how would you differentiate, as you as a company thought about kind of loan dollars versus venture investment and tax credits and things? How did it position itself in your strategy?
I think it comes down to just the one concept that's often in the top of mind of entrepreneurs is dilution, and when you take investment dollars that take up equity, it's more dilutive than, let's say, a loan is, and that's one of the ways we think about it, and it's again back to that resonance of when you're able to use loan dollars to prove your concept or idea, you're able to reduce the risk by achieving risk mitigating milestones. When you do that, you are able to increase the value of the entity. And thus, when you raise money or investment to take it to the next level, it can be less dilutive to those in the company. And so there's kind of an interplay between the two. And that's one way we think about it.
That's a great point. Kavita, did you have another question?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. So it sounds like this program is 12.5 million. And I was wondering how much the first program that you announced was, and if you expect all of the, I think it's 5 or 6 programs to be around this 12.5 million.
Yeah, you're right. It was 12.5. This one's 12.5. I believe the venture program may be closer to 24, if I'm right, Kevin. So they're not all exactly 12.5. But we are trying to disperse it across. The other unique thing is, and Kevin, you can speak with more clarity to this probably, but we have the ability to move money between these buckets as we go. I mean, part of this is putting the levers out there and seeing how the market responds. So depending on the demand for each of these different levers we're going to put out, we can make some shifts if needed, based on the popularity.
Yeah, just a little bit more on that. Treasury requires that within the first 3 years, we have 80% of our capital committed. We can administratively move small amounts between the funds based on demand. However, if we were to make a major modification, we'd have to go back to Treasury for ultimate approval. And just to clarify maybe one thing for you, Kavita, you asked about why not grants. I think I said this, but if I didn't, I just want to be clear that Treasury does not allow us to do grants. And so our point is creating a longer, more evergreen types of programs.
Do you think about the tools in the kit? I mean, you got the Launch Minnesota Innovation grants that are grants, right? That come from our state. You got the tax credit, the angel tax credit. You got loans with the growth fund here, and then an announcement coming soon on an increased venture vehicle. We're trying to hit all the angles of this issue to really give startups and venture investors some flexibility on what they need to based on their goals. Other questions from our guests? Well, Paul and Ping, maybe we'll give you the last word as leaders in our ecosystem. Anything else you want to share before we wrap in this conversation on this program or what it means for Minnesota? Maybe Paul will go to you first.
Yeah, this is part of the transformational access to transformational capital that many of these entrepreneurs need. I think when we get these programs fully executed, you're going to see a lot of innovation, a lot of startup activity from diverse communities that people kind of haven't seen before, and that's going to benefit all of our citizens in our state. So once these folks have their innovative capacity funded, we'll see a lot of job creation in the community. So I'm really excited about these kind of programs.
Thank you, Commissioner Grove, for the opportunity to speak today. I concur with Dr. Campbell on the power of this kind of funding. There is a huge competition out there for ideas, for entrepreneurial activity in communities, because there is a huge impact that having a thriving startup ecosystem has on a general community. And when you have the two together, it creates a situation where there's a multiplying effect. And I think that the programs like this, as well as the Angel Tax Credit, hope it comes back, can make a huge difference for the community across the board.
Well, thank you, Ping, and thank you, Dr. Campbell, and the whole team here. We're excited about this. This is a big fall for Minnesota small businesses, and it's coming at exactly the right time. And we are just committed to playing a very assertive role as a government and doing what we can to fill those gaps in the market that exist, and then get out of the way and let entrepreneurs like these build the next chapter of the Minnesota economy. So thanks for joining us, everyone. We appreciate your time. Joinusmn.com/small business. That's joinusmn.com/small business. Your front door to everything you need to know about small business resources at Deed. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.